Hello everybody. Today we're going to look at the Azure VPN gateway services and running some on-site connectivity to our resources in Azure. So if you already have an Azure environment set up over in the cloud, you might have a VNet, and inside this VNet you might also have, or I say might, you will have inside this VNet specific subnets that you will have resources attached to. Those kind of resources could be things like virtual machines or scale sets or private links with SQL Server or storage accounts or anything like that. What you might also have is you might actually also have an office location. Now, if you've been working from home since the incident, you might not remember the office. It's that place with bad lighting and terrible coffee that you had to drive to every day. So inside the office, you've got people that are working on their own laptops and desktops. You've got your servers running, and you've got your domain controllers running, and you've got all sorts of fun stuff happening in the office. And what you want to do is you want to make use of the resources you've got in Azure, like these virtual machines, as if a user is connecting to services that exist in the office. Now, to do that, what we're going to need is a connection between these two locations. And one of the ways of doing that is by using an Azure VPN gateway. Now, when you can create an Azure VPN gateway service inside Azure VPN gateway, this needs a little bit of configuration. One of the things it actually needs to do is connect to a very specific subnet inside your VNet. And this subnet needs a very specific name. It needs to be called Gateway Subnet. Gateway Subnet. And that is with a capital G and a capital S. When we go and build this solution, you'll see that this actually gets created for you when you go and create an Azure VPN gateway. What you'll also need on site is you'll actually need some sort of VPN endpoint. Now, this could be something along the lines of, a Cisco device or a F5 device or a Juniper device, or it could be something like a SophosXG firewall. These are very nice little firewalls. You could even use something open source. You could use something like pfSense to be able to actually create this VPN connection. It doesn't particularly matter as long as the VPN connectivity supports IKEv2 for the latest version. If it supports IKEv2, you can connect this as well. So when you create an Azure VPN gateway, you can run a VPN tunnel between these two locations here. And this essentially converts Azure resources over this side of the equation into being a little bit like a second site. So if you had London, Edinburgh, London, New York, in this case, it's just Office and Azure with a VPN connection running between the two. Now, a few considerations with this. Yes, you can connect these VPN gateways to big iron solutions like this. You could have multiple offices as well. It wouldn't matter if you had another office location up here and you ran another VPN connection to that office. That wouldn't be a problem either. What you can also do is within these VPN connections, you can also have users that exist completely externally with their laptops, or users that are working from home with desktop solutions, and you can make VPN connections like this. So it can act as a VPN endpoint for individuals connecting to resources in Azure, and also maybe that's also acting as a resource for people to be able to connect things that exist inside the office without them having to connect directly to the Office VPN solution here as well. That's really, really easily achievable. There is actually a VPN client from Microsoft. You can configure this really easily. That client actually comes here from the Microsoft App Store. You can also grab it from the App Center if you want to sideload it into your users' devices. And that connects very, very quickly and easily. So another consideration for these VPN gateways for people is really a couple of questions come up. And a couple of questions that I normally see is it fast? How fast is this? How fast is this connection? Well, there's a number of SKUs or stock gatekeeping units for the Azure VPN gateway configuration. This thing can go pretty quick. In fact, if you're wondering how fast this thing runs, the consideration is not normally how fast is Azure running, it's how fast is your connection at the office running. Here we go. If we take a look at some of these SKUs, and you take, for example, down here, a Generation 2 VPN gateway, you can actually get up to 10 gigabits per second here. So that's going to be pretty quick and fast enough for most organizations out there. The other consideration is this VPN solution highly available? Is it highly available? And the answer to that again is yes. High availability, especially when you're talking about cloud solutions, is pretty much just a question of how much money you've got to spend. So if we look at the high availability solutions for this, there's a multitude of different ways you could actually possibly do this. You could, for example, have high availability with one on-prem VPN connection and have a offline standby solution here. And this is essentially protecting you against this VPN gateway failing. To be honest, the odds of that happening in Azure are quite minimal anyway. But if you need it, it's there. You could also have a situation where you have two on-prem solutions and multiple lines of connectivity to an active passive solution inside the cloud. So again, now you're protecting against your on-site systems failing. That's fine. We could flip that around the other direction, one on-site and two active in the cloud. Remember, the more things you have active, the more you're actually paying for here. Or you could have the ultimate solution where you have a complete active connection. But here you've got a lot of connectivity. You're paying for two on-prem firewall solutions, well, firewall VPN endpoint solutions, and two VPN solutions, our Azure Virtual Network Gateways existing in the cloud. And not only that, you have to maintain 1, 2, 3, 4 different network configurations down here. So the setup process is a lot harder. But if you have the money, and you really need to protect yourself against not just on-site failure, but Azure failure, this is the kind of solution that you want, an active solution. So setting all this up is actually really quite simple to do. And we're going to take a look at that now in the demo. Okay, so we're back here in Azure. And on this subscription, we have two resource groups, an on-prem resource group and an S2S resource group. This on-prem resource group is going to be simulating our office environment and is going to contain a SophosXG firewall. This S2S environment is site to site. This is going to be simulating our Azure side and our Azure VNet gateway. So if you have a look inside on-prem, we have an XG firewall. This is a SophosXG firewall that's running in the cloud. And if we look at S2S, we don't have anything yet because we are going to create these resources. So first of all, we need to build ourselves a virtual network. So if I drop into virtual networks here, and I go and create a new virtual network. We're going to call this virtual network. We're going to pop it into S2S_RG, and we're going to call this S2S_RG-VNet. Okay, and we're going to leave this in East US. The IP address spaces for this, we're going to actually delete this default IP address range, and we're going to add a new IP address range of 172.17.0.0/16. And within that, we'll drop in another brand new subnet here. Just call this subnet-0. And inside subnet-0, we're going to have 172.17.0.0/24. This is going to simulate our Azure side of the equation. We're going to add that in here. We're then going to review and create this virtual network and wait for that to build. Now our virtual network has been deployed. We can go to that resource, and what we need to do here is check on a couple of things. We need to come down to the subnets first, and what we need to do is you need to click a special button up here called the Gateway Subnet. This will create a very specific subnet with a very specific name called gateway subnet with a capital G and a capital S. If you're ever doing this manually, this has to be named gateway subnet with a capital G and a capital S. We're going to save this gateway subnet here. This is going to be the subnet that is used for our virtual network gateway. So what we're going to do now is we're going to drop in here into virtual network gateways, and we're going to create our own virtual network gateway, the thing that's going to be used for us to VPN to from our on-site SophosXG firewall. We're going to call this S2SGW. It's going to be in East US. This is a VPN rather than express route, and this is route-based rather than policy-based. Only use policy-based if you're using older versions of routers that support VPN, i.e. anything that actually uses IKEv2 VPN. If you're using anything else other than IKEv2 VPN, you want to choose route-based on here. So the other setting I want to go and change here is the SKU. I'm going to drop this to basic. These higher grade SKUs will run this faster than I need it to be. I'm going to change this generation to leave it at generation 1 on basic, and I'm going to attach this to the virtual network of S2SRG VNet. It's going to automatically attach us to that gateway subnet that we needed as well. We're also going to go and create a public IP address for this thing as well. So we're going to go and create a new public IP address, and we're going to call it S2S underscore GW dash or GW dash pip for public IP. We're going to tags. We're not going to bother to tag this, and we're just going to review and create. Now, when you create a virtual network gateway, this will take a long time. This will take approximately or up to 45 minutes to deploy. Okay, that's 45 minutes. This is going to take a while. Go make a coffee. If it's taking 20, 30, 40 minutes, that's perfectly normal. I'm going to skip ahead until we get this until this is deployed. So while our virtual network gateway is deploying, we're going to drop over here to our SophosXG firewall. Now, by connecting to the public IP address of the SophosXG firewall, I can hit its admin page. If you want to deploy your own SophosXG firewall, you can do, and you can do that directly from the Azure portal, and you can deploy that from the marketplace here as a SophosXG firewall solution. This is exactly the same as the SophosXG firewall that you would find on site. It's just running as a virtual appliance. So here is that virtual appliance's web page. You can see that the connection is not private because it's using a self-signed certificate. That's perfectly fine for our purposes here. But if you were setting one of these things up in the real world, you would actually go and put a proper certificate that was signed onto this SophosXG firewall. So we're just going to log into this SophosXG firewall with some very basic credentials here. We'll go and drop in the username of admin, and we will drop in our super secret password here as well. And we'll prove that I am a real boy and I'm not a robot with GN7NA0. I think that's a 0. Let's find out. Nope. Apparently I'm not a real boy. We go to admin. Pop in that password again, check that password's correct. Yes, and we'll put that in as a G or a 9. I'm going to go with 9. EEK5G. Login. Is it going to work? Yes, it's worked. Okay. See, I told you I am a real person. I'm not just an artificial intelligence doing Azure instruction on YouTube. Let's click I accept on this. So I don't want to register my firewall now, and I don't have a serial number, so I can start a trial straight away. This is one of the advantages of using a SophosXG firewall solution here. We can go and play with it in the cloud without having to commit to anything or having to register our details at all. Very, very useful tool. So now we are logged into our SophosXG firewall. We can see there is a whole number of options that we can do with this because this is a big iron firewall. But the only thing that we actually want to play with down here is the site-to-site VPN. Now, one of the things I'm going to need within this site-to-site VPN is I'm actually going to need the IP address of our virtual network gateway. So if I drop back here, we can see that our virtual network gateway has now been deployed, and we can go to that resource. In here, we can check that we've actually got a public IP address, which is down here, 52.188.61.93, and I'm going to grab that public IP address ready for my configuration. So once I've pulled up that, what I can do is I can go and create a new IPsec connection here and add that onto the SophosXG firewall. And with some magic, with a few settings, what we'll have is a VPN connection between an on-premises location and an Azure location as well. So we're going to call this on-prem to Azure. Keep it very simple. It's IPv4. We're going to activate this on save. We're also going to have a firewall rule created. Within our profile, notice that Sophos have been nice. They've included a Microsoft Azure IKEv2 down here. You'll find that a lot of the big iron firewall providers actually provide a profile for this. So we're going to create a pre-shared key here and use a super secret pre-shared key of 123456789. It doesn't matter, this is just a demo, okay? So on these gateway settings, we have local gateway settings and remote gateway settings down here. We're going to change our listening interface down here to port B, and the gateway address of the remote gateway is going to be that of the on-site Azure, sorry, not the on-site, the Azure solution, the Azure VPN gateway. The local ID is going to be an IP address, and the local ID is going to be the IP address of my site, my SophosXG firewall. The remote ID on the other side of this equation, the one that it's actually connecting to, is also going to be an IP address, and it's going to be the IP address of the on-site Azure the cloud Azure solution here. The local subnets, if we click add subnet down here, and we'll click add, the name of this is going to be the local subnet. And this is the subnet that exists behind the SophosXG firewall, what would be your actual on-site solution, your office-based solution. So we'll do 10.0.0.0, and if we do with a network here, do that again, sorry, 10.0.0.0, and it's going to be /16 because for some reason the Sophos interface doesn't allow me to actually type that out. And we'll just click save on this one, and then we can go to remote subnet, and we can go and add a new item down here, and within this item we can go to call this the Azure subnet down here. And we'll do the same thing, but the Azure was 172.170.0/16. Can't put the slash in there, we have to select it from the drop down box, and we can go and save this as well. Now that we've saved both of those resources, we can add the Azure subnet here, and we can add this local subnet here. Now when that's completed, let's just save that resource, and we'll continue. This does not have anything to connect to at the moment. The connection gets activated, but the connection will not be able to connect to anything just yet, because we still need to make some configurations back here on the virtual network gateway solution. So back on the virtual network gateway solution, we're going to drop in here, and we're going to drop into connections, and we're going to add a brand new connection. This connection is going to be called the gateway connection, and it's going to be the connection that connects to the SophosXG firewall. So it's a site-to-site IPsec connection down here. The local network gateway that's going to use to actually connect to that, we're going to create a new one, and we're going to call this on-prem GW. The endpoint is going to be the IP address of the SophosXG firewall, which is 20.237.171.21, and we're going to have the address space of the remote systems. Well, it's remote to this Azure environment, but it's actually the local IP addresses, and we're going to OK that. The pre-shared key to connect between these two is 123456789. It's that super secret password. For some reason, Azure doesn't star it out, but SophosXG firewalls do. And we can OK this. This might take a while to actually turn on and configure itself, but once it does, we should be able to make that VPN connection between these two resources. Our gateway connection is currently set to unknown. If I hit this refresh button, we've still got unknown. If we wait a few minutes, we are now connected to our SophosXG firewall. If we drop inside here, we can also see that this gateway connection is nicely connected here. And if we drop into the SophosXG firewall, we'll notice that this is actually active and the connection is connected. And that concludes setting up a basic site-to-site VPN connection between an Azure Virtual Network Gateway and between a SophosXG firewall. And you know the routine, hashtag like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed this video and will join me next time. Goodbye.